the nuisance building owner. This is about that time when, along with my best friend Hannah, we decided to open a nature-themed restaurant. It was Hannah's idea, and as her best friend, I had faith in her idea. So we started to look for affordable places, but it was harder than anything. That was when we found a rooftop, one-room apartment. The area wasn't that popular, but we still decided to take it on a lease. And on top of that, it was affordable. We talked to the owner and gave him the advance after signing the contract. He gave us the key, and then we started to work on it the next day. We started working on our own, converted the room into a kitchen, and decorated the place by adding items of furniture, different types of plants, and other things. The rest of the rooftop was converted into a place where customers would be sitting and enjoy their time there. After days of hard work, the restaurant was finally ready, and it looked better than our expectations. Hannah was the one who worked harder than anyone else on this. She would wake up early in the morning and go outside to promote the place, then come back and clean the area. Both of us were working hard, but she was trying to do more than me to make the place a success. And I did. After a month, the people started to show interest in our restaurant. They found our restaurant unique and were intrigued by the theme. Within a few months, the business started to boom, and the restaurant became popular. But one day, the owner of the building suddenly showed up and started to demand some percentage of the profits, saying that it was his place and he deserved it. We denied, saying to him that we'd already paid the lease money in full, and that it was us who made the place popular and not him, and there was no contribution of him to this place. After several of his threats, when we did not agree to share our profits with them, he told us that he would not renew the lease as agreed upon. Contract we signed was for 1 year, and 6 months had already passed. After he was gone, Hannah looked distressed the entire day. I talked to her and told her that we could collect enough money to move the restaurant to a bigger and better place. After convincing her, we continued focusing on the restaurant and decided to save more money by the time the contract expired. But a few days later, the owner converted the first floor into a sauna bathhouse, as he realized that the place was getting more popular by the day. So he grabbed the opportunity and made it beneficial for him. He started snatching our customers before they could even reach our restaurant. He made the sauna's bath theme a traditional one to lure customers in. I was getting frustrated day by day because the craze of our restaurant started to fade because of him. It wasn't just Hannah this time who was stressed. We both were. I loved Hannah too much, and watching her lose her sleep over this was getting to me. She was working harder than before, and she was trying to promote the place even more. But it was only doing well to the building owner because he was getting the customers without even moving his hand. He included his wife in this little scheme of his as well. One night I woke up to the voice of Hannah crying, and it broke my heart to watch Hannah feel devastated. I knew how many efforts and time we both had put into this, and how Hannah's efforts were even greater than mine. The next day, the building owner mocked us, saying that he'll be making sure that we're broke before the time of our agreement ends, so that we can not move the restaurant anywhere else. That day, as we were working, Hannah looked tired and defeated, which was crushing me on the inside. I was feeling a bit of rage, and that was directed towards the building owner and his wife. And in the fit, I decided to take revenge. I knew that the owner's wife used to take a bath after closing time before heading home. She was a beautiful woman, and a part-timer from the neighboring flower store had a major crush on her. That was not all. I knew that the building owner, even having such a gorgeous wife, had a weakness for young beautiful women and could not resist taking improper advances towards them. So I carefully observed them for a few days, and one day, when I had the chance, I sent the part-timer saying that I needed something from the sauna bath, knowing that the building owner's wife was there enjoying the sauna bath. And I had already asked the owner if I could enjoy the sauna bath alone when no one would be there, telling him the same time as her wife, because I knew no matter how much he hated us, he would not deny this opportunity to sexually harass me. So after setting up the trap, I simply hid there to enjoy the show. I only wanted to cause a conflict between the husband and the wife because the ownership of the sauna bath along with the building was shared between them. So if they were to get divorced, it could affect the sauna baths negatively, and our business would start blooming again. At that time, I had no idea what I'd put under action. When the building owner entered the sauna after closing time, he noticed that someone was in one of the sauna bathrooms. So he thought it must be me and entered. But what he saw was not me, and instead, his wife in an inappropriate position with the part-timer. The two of them were having sex. He got furious by the scene he had just witnessed and started to beat the part-timer up. And when the part-timer fell unconscious from the beating, he grabbed his wife by the hair and dragged her, beating her instead. He did not realize how far he'd gone until he had felt that his wife wasn't moving anymore. So he checked her pulse only to realize that she was dead. He flew from there after that, and as I was hiding and watching them, I witnessed everything. Sauna baths did not have any surveillance cameras installed, so the only witness was me and the unconscious part-timer. I immediately called 911 explaining the situation, and of course, left out the part about my plan going wrong. I only told them that I went there for a bath and witnessed the whole scene. The police came and took the testimony of both the part-timer and me. The search for the building owner started, and he was found hiding in one of his unrented apartments. He immediately got arrested for murdering his wife and assaulting the part-timer. After his arrest, the sauna baths were shut down, and the customers started to return to our restaurant slowly. I assured Hannah that I had so much faith in her that if she could turn this place into a success, she could do it anywhere. We saved enough money and took an even nicer place out on a down payment. Before moving the restaurant, we told everyone, and even put a board which said our restaurant has moved to a different location. Setting up and making the new place successful was not that hard. We managed to achieve this with hard work and support of each other. It has been 2 years now, and our business is more successful than ever. And I even realized that I have romantic feelings for Hannah. So wish me luck, guys, because I'm planning on confessing to her tonight.
Hey guys, thanks so much for all the support. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please feel free to do so.
The girl I fell for. I was born into a poor family. Well, my family was not always in that state. In fact, my father used to be one of the richest men in town before I was born. But due to a bad investment, he went bankrupt and started to fight with my mother. She was pregnant with me at the time and got divorced as soon as she gave birth to me. She got remarried soon after that, leaving me in my father's care. As I was growing up, I never got my mother's love or my father's. Hell, I didn't even receive a proper education. My father started drinking and gambling with all the money we had left. When I turned 15, he kicked me out, saying that he did not have money or resources to take responsibility. I went to my mother after that, but she also turned me down, saying that her new family would not allow her. And apart from that, I reminded her too much of my abusive father. I was homeless for days, but then I started working for small petty jobs to earn some money for my survival. And after a few months, I saved enough money and rented a small one-bedroom apartment. I got a job at a department store as a cashier and started working there. It was going well and everything. I managed to keep my job for about 2 years or so, but then one day the owner died, and his son, who was the new owner, fired me to hire a girl instead. After getting fired from my old job, I started hunting for new ones, but I couldn't find any. And due date of rent was also almost over my head. I did not have enough friends, except for Marcus, whom I met while I was doing a part-time job. He told me about this new sauna bathhouse that had opened a few months ago and said that they were hiring. So I went there, asked for any openings. They asked me several questions, but I was not suitable for most of the vacant positions because I was not qualified enough for them. So they gave me the position of janitor. I did not have any issues with that, so I accepted the offer. The pay was also higher than my last job. That day was Friday, and they told me to report on Monday. I went home, and when I reached there, the owner was there for rent. I told him about my condition and also that I got a new job, and that I would pay him as soon as I get the money. He was a nice guy. He knew that I was a homeless orphan before coming here. In fact, he was the one who helped me with getting my last job, so paying rent was never a problem. But still, I always wanted to pay up on time, out of respect for myself. And he knew that about me. He told me that I could get some time for paying the rent, and he didn't mind at all. After saying that, he gave me the side dishes he brought for me, which he often used to do. Apparently, he did not have any children of his own, so he used to call me son, and his wife used to send me side dishes for me. It didn't have the heart to deny his generosity, so I always accepted them. I spent the weekend relaxing and resting in my apartment, which felt very boring to me. And on Monday morning, I woke up early, took a shower, and got ready and headed towards work. When I reached there, a lady explained my work to me. I started my work right after that. It was mostly cleaning, etc. As I was working near a sauna room, I saw a gorgeous girl who had just been in her late 20s, and she was instructing a customer on something. She saw me staring at her and passed me a smile. I felt embarrassed that I was caught and continued to focus on my work. "So you're the new janitor, huh?" I heard someone's sweet voice and turned to see that it was her. I nodded my head yes, and apologized for staring at her. "Oh, don't worry about that. I do not care for some stares. In fact, it felt good. By the way, my name is Jade. I work here as a bathing facilitator," she said while laughing. "Hi, I'm Rob," I said in a hushed tone. "Okay, Rob. I'll see you around then." She left after saying that, and while leaving me speechless and mesmerized by her beauty. After that day, Jade and I would often have small talk while working. Things were going just fine until one day when she asked me if I wanted to hang out after work. Well, you may have figured out that by now, I started to have a crush on Jade, so I agreed. She took me to a bar, and we enjoyed ourselves the entire night. It was around 2 a.m. or so when she told me that she forgot her purse at the sauna bath place, so we went back to pick up her purse. But when we reached there, it was unlocked. She said that the owner must be there or something and asked me to wait outside while she would quickly grab her purse and come back. I waited there for around 30 minutes or so, but when she didn't come back, I went inside looking for her. She wasn't around the reception area, so I looked around only to see that she was sitting on the ground, frozen. There was a stick-looking like thing right in front of her, which was covered in blood, and her clothes were all torn up. I looked in the other direction, and a man's body was laying there, covered in blood. His left eye and chest looked like they got stabbed multiple times. Again, I looked towards Jade, and the stick in her hand looked like a hair accessory to me. I understood the situation, and I went towards her and covered her with my jacket while telling her that everything would be alright. She looked at me with a painful look in her eyes and started weeping. I told her that we should get rid of the body and asked her if there was any surveillance cameras installed there. She told me that there wasn't any, and I felt a bit relieved. She said to me that there was a big fireplace installed in one of the sauna rooms which was rarely occupied, so we took the body over there, started the fire, and threw it in. We waited there to make sure that the body was completely incinerated, and I cleaned up the place nicely, so the smell of blood would not linger there anymore. We left the place and after that went to our homes. I could not stop thinking about it because I had no idea who that person was. Was it the owner of the place or someone else? We decided to never talk about it ever again. I hope that no one finds out about this, and luckily, no one has come to ask about anyone yet. I'm still working there, and still don't know who that man was, but I don't even want to know about it.
From the mid-1980s to the early 1990s, the rural South Korean city of Hwaseong was terrorized by a merciless and predatory serial killer. Between September of 1986 and April of 1991, a total of 15 women and girls were found bound, gagged, violated, and in most cases, strangled to death with an item of their own clothing, usually their socks, underwear, or pantyhose. The murders prompted the largest criminal investigation in South Korean history, with over 20 million man-hours spent poring over witness statements, analyzing crime scenes, and interviewing over 21,000 suspected culprits. The nightmare began on September 15th of 1986, when a 71-year-old woman named Lee Won-im disappeared while returning home from visiting her daughter. 4 days later, her family's worst fears were confirmed when her body was found dumped on some nearby farmland. Just over a month later, 25-year-old Park Yun-suk vanished after a bus ride back from Songtan. Her body was found just 2 days later, naked and strangled, floating in a local canal. The murders continued month after month for years. Always the same type of victim, always murdered in the same way. It was quite clear that Hwaseong had a dangerous and determined serial killer on their hands. The only trouble was, how would they go about catching him? The Hwaseong murders are notorious all over South Korea for being the country's first modern serial killer, especially in the sense that a particular modus operandi was applied to all known victims. However, the investigation was so intense and far-reaching that, after just a month's worth of police work, the list of suspects had grown to include a mind-boggling 21,000 different people. On top of that, A whopping 40,000 people had their fingerprints taken, but the true list of suspects could potentially be narrowed down to the few hundred that actually had DNA samples taken from them. Even shorter is the list who had hair samples taken, which is down to a mere 180 different people. Given that the murders had occurred all within a 4-mile radius of downtown Hwaseong, hundreds of pairs of police officers and volunteers were positioned within just 100 meters of one another. Their job was to patrol the surrounding area, keeping an eye out for anyone suspicious. But the killer simply worked out where police presence thinned out and attacked there instead. It seemed that not only were the police unable to prevent the killer from striking again, but the killer himself was unable to resist the urge to hunt and to kill. The first big breakthrough came in September of 1988, when police were able to commission a composite sketch of the suspect, one based on the witness statements of a bus driver and his conductor. He was wiry, a shorter man, aged between 24 and 28 years old, with a sharp nose and short cropped hair. Some victims also described him as having soft hands, which suggested he had a mostly sedentary occupation, possibly as an office or textile worker. This description was corroborated with existing carnal assault reports, and the conclusion was chilling. Their suspect had been engaged in venal, predatory activity for almost a decade prior to killing for the first time, and it became apparent that South Korean police were dealing with one of the most fiendish and prolific criminals in the country's short history. It also appeared that the killer had a bizarre fixation which influenced not only his choice of victims, but also the timing of his attacks. It was noted that the killer's victims had been women wearing red clothing, and that they had been targeted on rainy days. This led some female police officers to set traps for him, walking alone in the greater Hwaseong area on rainy days while wearing items of red clothing. Yet it seemed the killer was wise to their ruse and avoided them altogether. The next major breakthrough came on July 27th of 1989, when analysis of a single hair found at one of the crime scenes led to the arrest of a 22-year-old male by the name of Yoon Sung-yao. Yet it was later revealed that this murder was totally unrelated to the others, and as positive as it was that police had caught themselves a murderer, the red clothing-obsessed serial killer was still on the loose, and the attempts to link all previous murders to their one suspect had arguably set the investigation back by years. Not only that, but it was later alleged that South Korean police had brutally beaten and tortured Yoon in their attempts to get a confession out of him. This meant that much of the evidence gained from his interrogations was completely inadmissible, and this caused a huge scandal with the South Korean police force. So much so that in December of 2019, police arrested 8 of the original investigators, charging them with falsifying documents, illegal detention, and physically abusing Yoon when he was in custody. It also became apparent that at least 4 possible suspects actually went so far as to take their own lives as a result of alleged police harassment. So, to say the police mishandled the case would be a grotesque understatement indeed. On the night of September 26, 1989, while the police were still investigating the Hwaseong serial killer, a home invasion occurred in the city of Suwon, just 13 miles from Hwaseong. The homeowner happened to be awake and confronted the armed burglar before calling the police. The man was arrested, identifying himself as Lee Chun-jae when questioned, and after a short trial in February of 1990, he was sentenced to 18 months in prison. Lee Chun-jae ended up being released after just 6 months, after an appeal hearing in which he claimed to have been the one who was attacked, and he'd simply run into the residence to seek shelter. Yet during those 6 months, something interesting happened. There was not a single new murder that could be attributed to the Hwaseong serial killer. Then just a few months after Lee Chun-jae's release, a 14-year-old girl was murdered whilst walking home from school on a rainy day, with investigators quick to note that she was carrying a red backpack. The killer was right under the noses of hundreds of homicide detectives working on the case, yet they failed to make any connections between Lee's imprisonment and the murderer's apparent hiatus. Lee Chun-jae remained quiet for a number of years, minimizing his murderous activities in the face of increasing police pressure. Yet in December of 1993, Lee Chun-jae's wife filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. She was appalled by his prison sentence and noticed how he'd become increasingly withdrawn over the years that preceded his conviction. Little did she know, her husband had been the very same murderous psychopath that had been terrorizing the Hwaseong area, and leaving him would only cause the cauldron of evil inside of him to violently boil over. On January 13th of the following year, Lee Chun-jae contacted his 18-year-old sister-in-law, explaining that his soon-to-be ex-wife had forgotten a handful of her belongings. When his sister-in-law turned up to collect them, Lee Chun-jae dragged her inside, brutally violated her, then strangled the life from her. Then, in a sick display of false compassion, he approached his heartbroken father-in-law to offer his help in the search. It's truly horrifying to think that, despite his words, Lee Chun-jae was only there to soak up the family's suffering, to revel in the destruction and anguish he had wrought. Yet in the days that followed, police noted that on multiple occasions, Lee Chun-jae seemed to suggest that his sister-in-law had been abducted and murdered. This was before investigators had any inkling whatsoever of her fate, so the fact that he was so adamant on her abduction was highly suspicious. Lee Chun-jae was also heard to ask, "How many years in prison do you serve for violating someone and murder?" And it didn't take long until the police investigation was focused solely on him. Eventually, on January 18th of 1994, Lee Chun-jae was arrested as the prime suspect in his sister-in-law's murder, and although he initially denied all involvement, he was convicted and sentenced to death in May of the same year. Again, upon his imprisonment, the Hwaseong serial killer apparently ceased to operate, but it would take 25 more years for them to connect the dots and realize that Lee Chun-jae was the monster that they had been looking for all along. On September 18th of 2019, South Korean police official announced that Lee Chun-jae was most likely the Hwaseong serial killer. This was based on a DNA match taken from the underwear of one of the victims, and other evidence linked him to almost all of the others. All the police needed to do was coax a confession out of him, and given that he was already detained at Busan prison for the murder of his sister-in-law, investigators had direct, round-the-clock access to the man. It then just took over 2 weeks, but in early October, Lee Chun-jae confessed to killing 14 women and girls over a 6-year period. He also confessed to almost 30 carnal assaults, along with almost 100 attempted assaults that matched up with a number of unsolved reports. Psychologists noted that Lee displayed psychopathic tendencies by being unable to empathize with the victim's pain and suffering, and continuously showing off his crimes. One particularly remarkable aspect of this case is that before it was even solved, it became the basis for a popular South Korean movie directed by Bong Joon-ho, the same guy who directed the Academy Award-winning black comedy Parasite. Song Kang-ho and Kim Sang-kyung star as Detective Park and Detective So, respectively, 2 of the detectives trying to solve the crime, and the film ends with Detective Park looking straight at the camera, trying to spot the killer amongst the audience by using a special eye contact method. Obviously, it implied that the killer was still out there, maybe even watching the film among the audience in question, and audiences were terrified by such a realistic prospect. Fortunately for them, Lee Chun-jae was in prison for the murder of his sister-in-law, meaning moviegoers were safe from his predatory advances. But it definitely speaks to the morbid fascination society has with serial killers, how a horrifying series of murders can so fascinate us that we'll seek to glamorize and serialize it before the killer is even caught.